Good evening and welcome. I said good evening. I don't know what time of day it is for these people.
Hello from whatever time it is in your world.
From wherever time it is, where you happen to be listening in the car, going for a run, whatever it is. Welcome to 180 Days Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Tim Pope.
And I am your other host, Karen Greenhouse.
We have a phenomenal guest tonight. He's a old friend of ours. I've known him for a long time and have been working with Chad closely for a while. So our guest tonight, his name is Chad McGlone, founder of a nonprofit organization called Mathkind that has been around, golly, for almost 10 years now. And their mission is to support math educators in developing countries. And I know Chad's going to share a lot about the work they do, so I don't want to steal a lot of that thunder. But I got to know Chad. He actually taught from the materials that you and I did professional development for back in the day. So that's how we first got to know him. And then he approached me at NCTM, golly, I'm trying to remember. I think it was Atlanta years ago. Brought up this idea that he was going to quit his job as a teacher and begin this nonprofit that has become Mathkind. So I think we're going to have a great conversation about the work Mathkind is doing and their commitment to equity and how that group sees its purpose in terms of serving and supporting math educators and students quite literally around the world. So before we go to Chad, it is time for our Notice and Wonder. All right, Greenhouse, impress. What'd you notice? What'd you wonder?
Oh dear, I don't know if I can impress, but so I've been, I do a lot of work with teachers and leaders, and some of the things I have noticed are that there is a lot, or there seems to be a lot more empathy and focus on students' social and emotional needs. And it's been really refreshing to hear because, you standardize testing and, pacing and all that seems to always be, we have to get through the content. But what I'm hearing now is, well, we don't want to rush things. Kids are so socially, so emotionally overwrought over COVID and all these things that we're just slowing things down. And if they're not through with the content for the test, that's okay. So it's just a very different attitude. And I wonder if that is actually is it going to impact scores or is it because teachers are much more accepting? They're not as upset about, the standardized test. They don't seem to care. So it's kind of refreshing and also a little interesting to think about how's that going to change things moving forward once we go back to normal. So that's just my wondering.
That is a phenomenal observation. That's a whole nother episode. It wouldn't be very mathy though. But I've recently had conversations just like in my family about this generational sense of mental health and how kids today approach mental health versus how I did when I was a kid. I talk to my own children about anxiety. And I mean, I'm of the age and culture where it was suck it up, buttercup, figure it out.
Yeah. It's much more out there. I mean, still so much more we could do, but I do think it is going to have an impact on how we teach and the pace that we teach at and the expectations. I think we put too much stress on kids. So I'm hoping that's my wonder. Is it going to actually change anything?
I share your wonder because I fight my own biases. I feel like, well, it's a generational thing now that I'm well into middle age around like what is mental health and how in terms of expectations and anxiety. And I mean, that was sort of the litmus test, right? When we were in school, like, well, yeah, can you handle the pressure if you're going to be a professional and go to a big college? Can you handle that pressure?
Right.
And that is no longer the world we live, which is probably a good thing. I'm just not sure how to perceive it.
I know. But it is something that at least is more aware. So that was my notice and wonder. How about you?
My notice and wonder, I've been sitting in meetings and talking to kids, and it's sort of noticing the impact, like long-term impact of COVID on instruction. I mean, the context was I sat in a meeting and we're trying to figure out how to make sure that I teach 11th grade and how do we make sure that what courses do they take next year, and did some analysis. At our school, there's a Colombian graduation test called Saber the kids have to take. Think like SAT on steroids. And then most of the kids also take the SAT because a lot of the kids are going to apply to universities in the States. And we're looking at the questions and realizing that one of the things that got cut was because of pandemic and reduced class days and reduced class times, probability and statistics has pretty much been wiped away from these guys' curriculum. It just never, it was always, because, typically prop stat, unfortunately, in this, well, we could do a whole episode on this and we totally should. Probability and statistics has always been the thing you do at the end of the year if you have time. And that's what has happened. And as a result, we did the analysis, and like 20% of the SAT math is probability and statistics, and a similar percentage of the Columbian graduation test. And I'm like, all right, now what the heck? How do we accommodate this? And what do we need to do? So that's the immediate issue. It's my notice. My wonder is, like, how often and for how long is that going to resonate as we look at instruction and we look at systems of math instruction? For how long is that going to percolate and become an issue that we have to acknowledge and work around?
Yeah, and I don't know that there's an answer because, every school district, every state's cut different things or focused on different things. So I think it's going to be different for so many. Yeah, that's a tough one.
All right. Well, with that, we will now do the somewhat awkward segue to the interview that we did, 2 or 3 weeks ago?
Yeah. Was it that long? Yeah. We did take a break. We took a break in February, the winter break. So we're back here. So yes, let's go right to Chad.
So why don't we start with actually your history, because you were a classroom teacher, and so maybe share a bit about your experience as a classroom teacher and then how that led you to do the work you're doing today.
Yeah, it actually starts a little even before I became a classroom teacher. I got a master's degree in statistics, and pretty much toward the end of my degree, my wife said, all you do is talk about the teaching you do and not the work you're doing in statistics. Have you ever thought about being a teacher? And I thought about it. I thought that would be wonderful. What a great way to share my experiences and knowledges with others. So I taught for a year in a public school in Chapel Hill, where I live. And what was interesting to me is, like, the most advanced kids were doing fine. They loved me because I knew the math very well. And they got excited when I would say something like, James Garfield proved Pythagorean's theorem while he was president. And that's a proof that we actually use called Garfield's proof. And they were very excited. Most kids were like, I don't really care that James Garfield proved Pythagorean's theorem. How do I use this in my daily life?
Exactly.
So, and I remember going to my like during one of my evaluations, I said, I've got to be able to do something different. I'm literally teaching the way I was taught 20 years ago. There's got to be something new. And they would say, no, this is it. You're doing great. You're one of our best teachers because you know math.
That is scary.
Yes. Well, thank you.
No, I'm saying that's scary that you're a great teacher because you actually know math.
Isn't it interesting though? I think our standards are low. If you know math, that's puts you a leg up.
Wow.
It's just sort of the state of education, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened was I went back to school to be certified, and I took a course. I mean, I have a master's in statistics. I took a course, a geometry course from Carol Malloy. It was for elementary and middle grades teachers. And I went to Carol beforehand. I was like, Carol, I've taken Euclidean and non-Euclidean geometry. I've proved all of this stuff. Do you really want me in the class? She goes, yeah, you have to be there. So I took the class, and it was fascinating because she would give you a task, and then she'd step back and let us do thinking and guide. She'd maybe provide guidance, but I was fascinated by these tasks, and I discover the patterns, and then I tell everyone, I go, hey, guys, listen, it's just this. All you have to do is. And after a week or so, Carol came and put her hand on my shoulder. She goes, what are you doing, Chad? And I go, I got it. I'm showing them. This is amazing. And she goes, yes, stop and listen. And so I spent the rest of the semester just listening to the way they articulated their thinking about mathematics. And it blew me away. Yes, they maybe couldn't say, let X be such and such, but their logic was really pure and really beautiful. And to me, that just changed the way I thought about teaching. So when I started teaching again, I wanted to make real world connections. And then I wanted to make global connections for my students. And it totally transformed the way my class was. I mean, it was a lot of work, but every day was an absolute joy. I just would rub my hands together. I can't wait to see what they do with this. And it's also fantastic to watch the kids start to develop this idea that I have to be a thinker in my classroom. I can't just listen. So that's really my history. And wanting to share that that joy of teaching with teachers around the world led us to Mathkind.
And now Mathkind used to be called something different, right?
Yes, I remember one trip going to like on a vacation. I said to my wife, I think we should do this thing, work with teachers around the world to help support them in the classroom and give them the tools to teach the way they know how to teach at home. And we spent probably 100 miles trying to come up with a name. And we came up with Teachers to Teachers International initially, which made sense. We were teachers working with teachers around the world, but it's pretty academic and it really was outward looking. To me, Mathkind is really something entirely different. It's saying, there's a mathematician in every human being. And what we're about is helping locals bring out the mathematicians in their students, local teachers. And by doing so, those individuals become empowered to make decisions for themselves. When outsiders come in and say, here's how you should solve this problem in the middle of Guatemala, they're able to say, well, wait a second, I live here. I know the experiences. Why don't you honor my knowledge? And that's what we think comes from this sort of title. A lot of extra things behind it.
So can you kind of give a synopsis of what Mathkind is? Like, how do you contact the schools and the countries that you're going to go to? Like, what is the goal?
Yes. So for me, and I have to say, one of the great joys of founding an organization is bringing people in that are way better at this than you are. So I can tell you that most of our staff would answer this way better than me. So what do? We really do start with a partnership. We have local leaders or organizations that are in education that want to change the way people are learning in their community. And what's amazing is they want to see people be stronger in mathematics. And that really means teaching in the classroom like you do at home. Most everyone teaches at home by doing. You never see a mom say, well, okay, I'm going to teach you to cook, open your textbook, and then we're going to have a test at the end of the week.
That's a great analogy. Yeah.
Yeah. She goes, let's break this egg. And sometimes you get egg in the yolk, little shells, and you have to clean it up. And that's what a great math class happens. So once we have buy-in from locals, and we really don't say, here's what you should do. You should teach this way. We say, hey, I was doing this great math activity. Can I do some math with you? Can we do a practice class? And almost always people say, that was amazing. How can I do that with my students? Because around the world, people genuinely care about their students. And then once the doors open, we could talk about what are the nuances of teaching. We start to build this toolbox of great strategies. What does it mean for a press for learning? And what is a great mathematical task? And what does it mean to defront a classroom? And what we're finding, certainly over the past 2 years, is if we can help 20 or 30 leaders in a country sort of gain a deep understanding of what mathematics education looks like, then they're able to present to classroom teachers in their communities. So now teachers are learning from people that look like them, who've experienced things that they've experienced. And it's not outsiders. I mean, I could come in and say, oh, all you have to do is teach this way, but I'm a white man from the US who's teaching in a classroom of 20 students. It's a lot harder to mimic that. But if I'm a local who's been teaching in your space and I've had experience, then that's really powerful. So that's sort of where we are now with Mathkind. And we're focusing in Ecuador. We have a team in Ecuador. We have locals that are working in the space, that are working with me and our staff. We also are in Guatemala. We're looking at working in Colombia with Tim, and then tons of connections around the world. When people hear what we do, they're just really engaged and want to work with us. Nepal is a place that we're doing work, and also Zimbabwe and Malawi.
So is it almost like the trainer model? You go in and you work with the leaders, who I assume are mostly teachers, and then support them as they then try to go into schools and support their teachers.
I mean, that really is. I mean, I think in each country it's different. It's so fascinating. In Guatemala, we really have to start with grassroots and work with teachers. I had a teacher in Guatemala who loved math, and by the time she was the teacher, that had been beaten out of her. And she said, after working with us, thank you for helping me find the joy in math.
Oh.
What had happened is, class for her was basically memorize your threes table. And then you'd have a quiz. And if you missed a problem, you get hit in the hand for every problem you missed. And so, and that's what she was thinking you should do. That's a good teacher. So what's fascinating is she's taken on these ideas and really made them local. I watched her class once, and they were teaching basically how do you combine, how do you simplify an algebraic equation, basically. And she had a big stack of equations on the front of her classroom, all laminated. And she was teaching a classroom of girls. They formed teams. The girls had to run up, grab one, argue about what the right answer is, and present it at the board. And if they presented at the board, they got 5 points. They throw it aside. They run and grab a new one. What an exciting class!
Yeah.
And she made those adjustments, having worked with us.
Nice. I guess my first question is: this is awesome, but why other countries and not the United States? Because clearly, our math instruction needs help and needs that same joy, because if you look around our country, we have just teaching, memorizing skills and procedures. So why did you make that conscious, I'm assuming it was a conscious decision to go outside?
Yeah, it was, but then again, we are working in the United States, and we do that in multiple ways. So the first way that we're doing is we have this great resource. I think it's a great resource. It's actually one of the very first things I talked to Tim about long ago. I was doing it in my classroom. It's how do you make global connections in your classroom? So, in the US, we're a culture of power, and I can just teach you about, there's a great task in the book I was using for key curriculum about the number of ants. Someone sees 2 ants one day, and the next day 7, and the next day 21, and so on and so on. And that's a really engaging task, but it's pretty sterile. It has no cultural context. But I could change that task, and I could say, well, in Cameroon, they have a very intimate relationship with bugs in this community. And in fact, they have bugs as pets. They eat bugs. And in very dry seasons, termites become a problem. And it becomes the talk of the town, really. People go, oh my gosh, I saw 3 termites one day. And then the next they go, it's getting worse. I saw 12, and then it's 15, and then 80. And when it becomes bad enough, that they call the chief and they say, you have to get the Joglavok. So what's the Joglavok? The Joglavok are army ants. They have colonies of about 20 million ants. And the chief, of course, sending his grandchildren, because that's what grandchildren are for, capture the ants, about 100,000 in a pot. The chief blesses them, releases them, and there's a war between the ants and termites. The termites win. In the US, teachers, we have the resources called Global Math Stories. That story is on there. I could set my class, and the activity that I do, it could be a multiplication task, it could be the exponential growth, and it comes alive. Kids may forget the formula for exponential growth, but they remember the Joglavok, because how could you forget it? And when you remember the Joglavok, you could rebuild the knowledge. What I also love about these real world connections is you can then do a social justice question. Like for the Joglavok, in the US, we just spray poison. Isn't that easier? The kids don't get stung. You don't release the ants, and it's a much more efficient strategy. But then, of course, there are things that come with that. And what's amazing, I've done this with second graders. I've done it with high school students. I say, what do you think? Should we just give them some poison? And they're like, no way. Sometimes they say, yeah, because then if they have the poison, they can do other things and saves time. So it's really cool because there's no one right answer. And it allows the kids to think deeply about mathematics and how it connects to the real world. So we're doing that for teachers in the US. And then another thing that we do is we bring teams of teachers from the US to work side by side with local teachers. So we really want it to be partnerships. So if we're working with a school in Ecuador, for instance, our goal and what we did before the pandemic, what we think we'll be doing in 2023 is bringing like 10 or 15 teachers to work with the teachers in our summertime. They're in school and really work side by side with those teachers, led by a leader in the field, like you, Karen. It'd be great for you to come on a trip.
I want to. I've been thinking and trying for years, but
it's happening.
It hasn't worked, has it?
No, but it will 2023.
Okay.
And because we have leadership on our staff now who can raise the money and can build this program in a really sustainable way. That's a transformative experience for the US teachers as well as the local teachers. The big picture is we also want to bring the Ecuadorian teachers to the US. We're trying to work on this with Wisconsin right now, so that in 3 years, they come to the conference and go, here's the things we know about mathematics. And it becomes a sharing of information from equals, not those from the US who are well-trained coming to share knowledge. And that's where we're heading. I'm so excited. It's been wonderful to sort of birth this idea with my wife, not know what to do as a parent, sort of, and to bring in someone who knows what they're doing so that I can continue doing the thing I like.
I mean, I know I met you, Chad, through Tim.
Yes.
Basically like, hey, would you be interested in this? And that, I mean, I don't even know how many years ago that was, but I know I've been jealous of Tim and some of the other friends that I know that have done this work with you. So maybe Tim and you can kind of share some of the experiences you've had being those teachers that go into the other countries.
It's an incredibly humbling experience. I mean, you really have to, if you open yourself up to it, because you do have to get past our standard American, like, all right, I'm gonna go show the developing folks how to do it right. And if you allow yourself to be immersed in the experience, and you learn some things that make you laugh, some things that make you cry. My one story, because it's funny. We were in the Galapagos a few years back, and Mathkind did a huge project over several years in the Galapagos, and Chad made the mistake of letting me tag along once. And so we were with these high school teachers, and we spent a week developing tasks and talking. And Chad articulated well, and especially when you get to secondary, it was just all very traditional. Like, right, you're going to learn these skills, and the teachers were brilliant mathematicians. I mean, they all had university math degrees. They were brilliant mathematicians. And we spent a week just like, how do we do tasks? How do we help? And that funding was about using mathematics to help kids connect to the incredible biodiversity that they have in the Galapagos, so that they can use that education to preserve and maintain that incredible environment in which they live.
Oh, nice.
And so it was really focused on how do we do this. And so at the end of the week, there was a task, like the teachers all worked together and they had to write a task that was grounded in a local cultural experience. And these three guys, I'll never forget them. They wrote an entire task about the sharing of Kentucky Fried Chicken. There is no Kentucky Fried Chicken in the Galapagos Islands. There's no chain restaurants. If you've never been there, nothing like that. And so then Tim was the other one presenting with me, another phenomenal human being. Hi, Tim, if you're listening. But we were like, we're trying to encourage, like, we really want you to think in terms of the culture. And the teacher looks at me. He's like, this is our culture. I am not kidding. People give their left arm when anyone goes to the mainland of Ecuador, they will bring tons of buckets of Kentucky Fried Chicken because it is so valued in the Galapagos because they can't get it.
Interesting.
Like, okay, there you go. I stand corrected. Do not assume to know someone's culture. I've overly romanticized it or anything like that. It was, yeah. So it was, I mean, it was just, that was an incredible experience. So I've gone on a few of the trips, and it really, you get a sense of what does education mean to folks, and how do they, like, what do they? I mean, these teachers are incredibly caring folks. You go to a few of the places we went. The teachers, I mean, American teachers want to complain about being horribly paid. Go to some of these other places where they're just hoping to get paid, and it is. You learn as much, if not more, than you teach.
I think Tim said two things that I thought were really, only two things you've ever said, Tim.
Exactly. I mean, he doesn't have many more.
Yeah, you keep me around.
Right. But Tim said this, he's like, you have to be careful when you're coming in to not tell them what to do. And I think that's a trap that a lot of people fall into in our country too, even when they do professional development. They come in and do professional development. The professional development is about students in the structure, or making kids be thinkers, or making their thinking visible. But we tell teachers that, and we say, now go do it in your classroom. And I think that's really hard. And I think it's really salient internationally, because we do have so much more experience academically, for sure, than the teachers we're working with. It's easy to go, well, here's what you want to do, and here's the task you want to use. So how do I partner with them instead of tell them what to do? And really, we've had Steve Linewan, Linda Gojak, Tim, leaders in the field come on these trips, And they humble themselves to be partners with the local teachers. And that's what makes a difference, I think. The teachers feel empowered, they think about their craft, and then they start to learn what it means to share. So I think that was a really important thing that Tim mentioned.
So how does it work? Like, what is this? You come as this team and you're going to work with these teachers in this country. What is sort of the structure around that?
So how does this happen? These are the very beginnings of Teachers and Teachers Now Mathkind really was teacher trips. The idea is, can we provide a meaningful experience for U.S. educators that will make a difference internationally? And we went to this little Mayan school in the mountains of Guatemala. It was phenomenal. We would be very deliberate about what we'd plan. And really, we'd come with a team of about 7 people, and each of our teachers would co-teach with the local teacher, math, science, language arts, the entire thing for a week. And then every afternoon, we'd have 2 sort of professional trainers, me and one other person. We'd do a workshop for the U.S. teachers and the Guatemalan teachers. And it was really fantastic. The relationships that we developed, we slept in the school. We'd walk around the community at night. We'd see these bands of children running around, taking pictures with them. And we'd go to the local store. It was really an immersion in the community. And then at the end of the week, we'd leave. And in the first 2 years, we'd leave and come back the next year. And they'd loved us. They would greet us with open arms, but they'd forgotten all the pedagogy. And so we realized if we really want to make a difference, we have to do something on the ground, which means, of course, then we have to put more money into it. We have to hire staff. We have to manage that staff throughout the year. But the teacher trips have stayed the same. Really, the goal is to bring a team of educators who really want to develop a deep relationship with teachers in a community. How does that scale? I'm not sure if we're going to be able to send teachers to every school around the world, of course. But we want to blend in to those trips, the leaders that we're bringing. And we've done that a couple of times. We've had people who are education leaders from the Philippines, from Asia, from Puerto Rico. They've come on trips as part of teams, and then that they take their experiences back and the relationships that come back. The relationship you develop with people, having been with them for a week, really endures. So that's truly what's happening. We follow up with workshops. And
I was gonna ask you, what did you mean that you do the week and then you come back a year later, it's not working, so you have to get on the ground and hire staff? What does that mean?
Yeah, so there are several components. It depends on the communities, right? But in Guatemala, for instance, really pretty much everywhere, we do 1 or 2 conferences, sort of where, again, leaders in the mathematics education start by doing mathematical tasks with people to say, here's this thing that could happen in your class. What do you think? Because we don't want to ever come and say, you should do it this way. And then we talk about what we did. And we're constantly pulling out, we're doing, let's build an equation. And then we're constantly stopping and saying, now, as a teacher, here's what I'm thinking. And here's how I'm eliciting conversations. So it's a different kind of way of doing professional development. So we do that. So the teachers now have a second way of experiencing sort of new strategies in teaching and learning. And then our staff in the country holds weekly workshops. Sometimes we have a thing called Mathmobile. It's a program where, we are not only are we doing professional development with the teachers, but we're really trying to come to their school and co-teach with them. So early in the program, we might actually do the teaching, model teach, so that the local teachers can see what we're talking about. And also it's, I also hate when we come in and say you should do professional development that pulls the teacher away from the classroom, the lesson prep, and all the extra duties they have. But if we do the Mathmobile program, when we come to school, they're excited because this means they're going to have a day that they can think about their craft and they don't have to deliver the lesson. So those are some of the things that we're doing. We have a girls STEM club in Ecuador. That seems to be the best way to approach it. That's a pretty cool program because for a school of underprivileged girls, the girls think that their only jobs they could have are really working at the family tienda or working as a housekeeper for someone.
Wow.
But what we're doing is after school, we're doing mathematical tasks. They go to like a museum. They went to like an ice cream making factory one day. And then they come back and later in the week, they do mathematical tasks based on that ice cream. And we have classroom teachers that are supporting our team. So now these teachers can try new strategies without the pressure of curriculum and testing writing over them. So if they make a mistake, that's okay because it's just after school. And what's amazing is the favorite subject for the girls in that school is math. They love this experience. And what's happening is those ideas that we're doing after school are starting to filter into the classroom. So those are some of the things that are doing. It's just multiple touches with local teachers and eventually local leaders in countries or professors of mathematics education programs. Those are things we're working on in Africa. So it's exciting and also hard to slow everyone down so that we can be deliberate and strong at what we do.
So you keep talking about teams. So do you actually have like full-time people in these countries or people that just go periodically throughout the year?
Yeah, we do. We have two people that live in Ecuador, and not just. I mean, they're amazing, amazing educators. Some people who are getting to the point where I'm sort of humbled when I talk to them because of how well they know their craft. So in Ecuador, we have two people. In Guatemala, we had two teacher trainer type people. We've just recently had a transition, so we want to hire another person in Guatemala. And then we have staff that supports. You know, if you have a team of teachers, for instance, that go to Guatemala or Ecuador, we have a whole bunch of stuff that's logistical that we have to manage. So we have that. I mean, it's just a typical nonprofit organization. We have an executive director who's doing some amazing work. We have a fundraiser. My wife does all of our marketing. It's exciting to see her take this on and truly understand education in a way that I never thought possible. So that's where we are. And when we move somewhere new, that has to be part of it. So, you know, we really would love to come to Colombia. Tim has some wonderful connections there. But we do that if we could do it in a way that allows us to make a long-lasting, sustainable impact, slowly handing leadership over to Colombians. That's our model. Same in Nepal. I mean, in Malawi, they want to have a training school at this university that I've connected to. That can only happen if it's sustainable and well-funded.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, I mean, Chad has been sharing like the current projects and the success stories. I mean, but part of the work that I've done with Chad in the past is sort of to do those initial scouting trips and go to places that we might work, and to find that for whatever reason, like, okay, this isn't going to work, that this isn't going to be a mutual partnership, and to go through that, I guess. I don't know, Chad, maybe share for a minute, like how do you discern, like, all right, Guatemala is great, this works and it's successful, Ecuador works, but then other countries, not that I want you to throw any former partners under the bus, but you don't have to mention examples. I purposely left out the names of the countries. But
Yeah.
like, how does your team discern, like, all right, here's a great opportunity, but for both the folks there that we would be working with, as well as the US based folks who would get that opportunity to learn?
Yes. Well, my answer is always yes. Let's just do it.
And it is. And as a member of his board, we frequently have to pull the guy back.
That's right. That's right.
Rein it in,
is.
Chad.
It is. But, you know, and this is it's an interest. What I've loved so much is I'm constantly learning about things other than mathematics education, working in this nonprofit field. You know, for a while we were thinking, well, it was opportunistic. You know, which are the partners? Literally, I did this in 2013. I went on a summer trip as sort of connected to a medical mission trip, and it was like, let's fix these teachers, sort of kind of thing. And I knew we could do something more, but I was worried that there would not be other opportunities in the world. And boy, was I wrong. Initially, it was sort of, let's go through an evaluation program. What is the need in those countries, and what is the safety? Then, if it hits the need level and we feel like it's a safe place, well, we should consider working there. But if you think about that, that's also deciding. It's a bunch of Americans, people from the United States, deciding who gets the wealth and who gets the money. Who are we going to share our wealth with? And I think the best model would be, let's partner with the locals in those communities and fundraise in both ways. So it's sort of a blend. It's sort of, what is the opportunity? and what is the sustainability of the model. I think there's great opportunity in Columbia because there are schools that want us to work there and they're willing to put some skin in the game. So we do some fundraising on our part, they do fundraising on their part, and there's a real ownership. And that's where I want to be. The same is happening in Malawi, where they're saying, look, we want to create this school. Now, can you find a way to fund the training so that you guys can come here? So that's sort of where I personally am. That said, we do have to be very deliberate and careful because to train a good leader in a country takes time. I mean, our staff has spent hours looking at principles to action. Now we're reading, still doing lesson studies and books regularly. We're spending a lot of time looking at building thinking classrooms and bringing in the authors of these books to talk to us personally. That's critical, though, to me, to sort of transform education and still honor the local knowledge.
So is everyone on your team, I mean, obviously maybe not the marketing and all that stuff, but are most of them former math teachers or educators in general?
Yes, most are. It's a real, yes. I mean, we're trying to find the balance between someone who says, oh, I've taught math 1,000 years and therefore I know what I'm doing. We want someone who has experience, but is also willing to continue learning and has sort of the humility. I mean, Linda Gojak comes on trips and she comes back from doing a workshop and she goes, what could I do better? What did I do wrong? She'll ask a teacher who's part of the workshop. I mean, you guys do this too. If people who have that kind of experience do that, that's what we want to see on our team. And we've had some people who say, well, I learned what differentiated instruction looks like, and it's according to the definition this, and therefore the class should look exactly this way, and I'll tell them what to do. That doesn't quite work.
And it's amazing. What amazes me is that, I mean, folks get so much out of it. Like we've mentioned Steve and Linda and, I mean, Arthur. I mean, there's just a whole list of eminent educators that are a part of this work who have been doing it for years and they won't go away. And it's not like anyone's making money. I mean, most of the time we're paying for the trip. So it's not a free vacation. I mean, we're paying just because it's such a phenomenal experience for us. I mean, and to have that opportunity to, and honestly, on the travel part, because at some point when we're going to talk about what people can do if they want to get involved, the teacher trips hopefully will come back. It's a phenomenal way to go to a country to see like Galapagos. I'll go back to that story just because I think it's fascinating. I was still in publishing at the time, and our CEO I told him like, hey, I'm going to take a week off and I'm going to go down to the Galapagos and do this work. And he was like, oh, that's great. He's like, oh, you have to tell me what it's like because my family, we're going to go there on vacation in a few months. I'm like, all right. So we go to the Galapagos and I mean, we stayed and we found an apartment. I think we had a couple places that we stayed and we all like whatever shared rooms and hung out and spent a week in the village and at the school, which was phenomenal. Like I mean, just like the little diners, and then at night they'd close down the street and put tables out, and you just point whatever restaurant you want to order from. Anyway, so we had this great week, and it was phenomenal. But then I'm like, where the heck is my boss going to? Because there's no way the CEO of my company is going to stay at the little apartment that we stayed at and eat in these little village diner places. Well, the last night we were there, that trip. The partner was a foundation, and the foundation had invited all of us that had been involved to a dinner to celebrate our work in the week. And they said, well, meet here at this boat dock, and then you're going to ride a boat to there. And so we got on this boat, and then we got off at this resort. I'm like, oh, this is where my boss is going to stay when he comes to the Galapagos. Because then it was the whole tourist side of the Galapagos Islands where the cruise ships come in and all that jazz. And it wasn't even connected by road to the village and the town where the local citizens live. And so it's a really neat way if you really want to authentically get a sense of a country versus just seeing the highlights. It's a great way to do it.
Yeah. And really, to become energized. I mean, I've had teachers say, I rediscovered my love of what I do. It gave me energy. Like, teachers sort of get beat. I mean, this year, even now, but
yeah, last couple of years.
Yes, right. I've just experienced that doing some co-teaching recently. But April, May is always a tough time. And a few people say, I get beaten down and then I remember that in June I'm going to go to Galapagos, or I'm going to go to Guatemala, or I'm going to go to this little community in the jungle of Ecuador. And that reinvigorates them. And it's amazing too, because these aren't always the easiest trips. I mean, we go to a place in Ecuador where you take a 4-hour canoe ride, motorized canoe upriver, to work with educators in a community that really escaped slavery in Ecuador in the 1800s and from these villages upriver. The only way you get there is by canoe. That's a tough trip, but it's also energizing and empowered.
You're not sleeping in a Hilton Garden Inn.
You're not.
You're not.
Yeah, right?
No,
so
you're not.
all of that. Yeah.
Let me, Chad, since we sort of tangentially mentioned the pandemic, why don't you share a bit about the work that Mathkind has been doing to keep maintain that support, even though you haven't been able to travel and to do the workshops as the group had done before a couple of years ago?
Yeah, like most, we really reflected on what we do and how we do it during the pandemic. And through most of 2020, Tim, I think you participated in one of these. We decided as a staff, we needed to learn the literature way better. And so we started with Principles to Action. And what was fantastic is we have such wonderful connections in the field of mathematics education. So we'd work with Principles to Action and then have, sometimes the authors of the chapters leading us, always partnering with some of the other amazing people. There are so many amazing mathematics educators that I've met, some who are famous and some who aren't, all of whom just blow me away and teach me every time I talk with them. So that was the starting point. We really gained a deeper knowledge, and I saw our staff grow and become much more sophisticated in the way they think about mathematics. And then we started reaching out. We called them learning labs. And so about 6 months in, our staff started having Spanish language learning labs. So they would do what we were doing with a cohort of Spanish language speakers from their community. And then we did a couple of virtual conferences in 2020. One was led by a person in Ecuador, Pau is her name, and she put together a conference. There were about 130 people that signed up for the conference, which was pretty great. I think it was one day, and it was all virtual. So about less than 100 attended, but that was pretty exciting for us. And so we thought 2021 came around. We thought we'd do the same thing. We'll do learning labs. Pau developed a couple of local partnerships, and we advertised it. And again, Pau pretty much organized it by herself. And 1,300 people signed up, and almost all of them came. It was so amazing. Zoom was like going, "What's going on here? You've completely maxed out your capacity for us." And Pau was exhausted, as you can imagine, trying to coordinate and all the diplomas. But what was amazing also is teachers took time off of school for it. So what we've done is we've learned that we can do some things virtually. And I think post-pandemic, we want to find a nice blend with our programs. So we do some virtual work. But, teachers open a window into their soul when they teach. It's a really personal, I'm sure you all remember shutting the door and it's like you and your students. Personally, as a teacher, I wanted my kids to walk out the door saying, my life has been changed, which I know is totally impossible each day. But that was what I was expecting. And what we're saying to teachers is that window into your soul is the wrong one. You need to close it and open a new one. And that takes real trust. And so I think you really have to have a personal relationship in some way with the people that you're working with.
So let's pivot. I sort of said this a couple minutes ago. I want to give you a chance to, you've mentioned several projects, but I'm a math teacher listening to this podcast and I'm intrigued. What are my options? What do I do?
Well, so especially if you're a teacher in the US, frankly, around the world, the first thing I would say is follow. Okay, so I see my wife is when we're done. So follow us on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. Like them, like posts, because that makes her excited, which I think is exciting too. But, for a U.S. teacher, something you could do right now is to make global connections in your classroom by using global math stories. The world is an amazing place. We have a story about reindeer racing in Finland. When it's in the middle of winter, it's cold. People go, "Hey, what should we do? Let's harness reindeers and drag race down Main Street, like you're snow skiing behind a motorboat, except it's a reindeer going full burrow that goes wherever the heck it wants." And what we have is it's called globalmathstories.org, or you could go to our website, mathkind.org, and find them as a resource. But they're like one-page stories about life in different parts of the world. And it's a way to weave in global connections into your classroom. I talked about the Jaglavak. They're goats that climb trees. The world's tallest building is the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. And it's shaped the way it is shaped because of a desert leaf and in the way. So there's just a lot of fascinating things, both internationally and in the US. So that's a way. We're also having a Global Math Story conference. It's going to be a virtual conference happening in March, and it will be free. People who come can do follow-up work and receive a virtual badge. So that would be, I think, is a great opportunity. And then over time, 2023, we hope to have more trips. And to be honest, we're doing this really exciting thing with Wisconsin, where we are trying to create a team of Wisconsin mathematics educators who are going to go on a trip in 2023. And we're going to partner a community with them and really let them guide what instruction looks like in that community. And I'd love to do that in other places in the States. I think we could, every state has enough teachers who really want to make a difference internationally. I had an educator come on a trip with us once and said, I made more difference in 1 week working with these teachers than I did beating my head against the wall in the US for 30 years. So it's a really rewarding experience.
As a member of the Mathkind board, I'm going to add one more thing to that list.
Good. Yes.
Which
yes.
is, you heard, like we're trying to bring teachers from Ecuador to the States. We're trying to fund staff members, educators who live in those countries. So if you go to mathkind.org, in the top right corner, there's this button that says donate.
Indeed. Kim will be very happy. Our executive director, Kim Glenn, will be very happy to hear you say that, Tim.
I was going to ask, where does your funding come from? And obviously people donating, but are there like big, the Gates Foundation, or there are things like that help fund you or anything?
Yeah, I keep texting Bill and I just don't get any response.
Come on, why isn't he responding? That's ridiculous.
I know, come on. I think we're a perfect match for those things. I mean, to be honest, I was the executive director and the one who came after us. We really were building the programs. A lot of the funding comes from private funding, and it's really people that I'm connected with. It's also my wife and me. And that's why we're ready to scale, I think. And we have a new executive director who's come in and who's thinking about this. What does it look like to make connections? And she's got us all very busy developing relationships with local funders, because we're able to make a difference if we get really a movement moving around teaching differently. I think we'll see it come back to the US. But that means a lot of people need to be involved, and lots of small donations. Some big foundations would be really valuable as well. But it really is personal. It's friends of mine. It's my wife. It's me. People like Tim, all of our board. Everyone is involved. I think people are really passionate about this because we are making a difference. And also, what Mathkind really commits to is honoring the expertise of the people coming. So if you came on a trip with us, Karen, we wouldn't say, you have to use this curriculum and I have to approve it and you have to say this. We say, here's the community. We're here to support you so that you can develop a relationship with them and help them feel empowered. But other than that, you're the expert. So I want to hear what you have to say.
So do you do training for the teachers that are going over to try to get them out of their mindset that Tim had mentioned before, that you go in thinking you're going to change?
Yeah, we do. We've been doing that pretty much for a while in two ways. One, we would meet virtually with people, and we still want to do that. This year, we want to have it even be more involved, especially if we're having a leader in the field as part of the trip. But even if you came on a trip, your first day or two would be just getting used to the space. Going from a city in the U.S. to the jungle of Ecuador is a big shift. And what we want to do is we want you to see that Ecuador has some amazing places to go that are very developed. There's a beautiful mall. Some of the best malls I've seen in the world are in Ecuador and in Guatemala. And I had the best time in this city. I always go see a movie at a movie theater in Guatemala. We want that to be part of your experience, because we don't want to go, oh my gosh, look at the poor little Guatemalans. But really, here's a group of people that have tremendous potential and are doing some amazing things. How can we help sort of push that along or help them drive it forward?
Yeah, if you haven't gone to a diner via tuk-tuk in Guatemala City, you haven't lived.
That's right. That's amazing. That's right.
So, and then you can also, I will say, just in terms of other ideas, one project, I am facilitating a service learning group at my school this year. and they are writing math stories as their project. They're also all fluent in Spanish, so half of them are helping translate some of the stories that are there so that they're more accessible to teachers and students who are native Spanish speakers. There are other ways on the service end that you or your students can get involved.
Yes, Tim, I'm really glad you said something about that, because I would love for people to add to our repertoire of global math stories. If you choose to write a story that's about your community, I wrote one about the balloon rally in my hometown. We had an author who lives near us wrote about his childhood in the 50s in Alabama, when they would look for little things after a flood in creeks or when it got really dry. It's called mudlarking. Um, and writing a story is a blast for sure, and it doesn't have to be well fleshed out or well written. Just basically, you get the idea, and then if you're the person who submits that idea, your name becomes attached to the story forever. So that's exciting to me. About 4 years ago, we had a boy in probably a second or third grader in Florida submit a story, and basically he's like, "There are a lot of peacocks on the island where I live, and they chase me when I'm at the grocery store." And so we did a little bit of research, and we realized that peacocks were an invasive species on that island, and it's become a problem. So it's like a 3-paragraph story that he has authored. And who knows, if a teacher in that island reads something and goes, "Oh my gosh, this is great, but it needs to be expanded," they'll submit a way of expanding it, and that story just becomes more involved. So it's sort of a Wikipedia kind of idea is my dream for it.
I can't help but kind of connect. I mean, it's different, but we just talked with Kareem
Mm-hmm.
Ani,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
like last month, and he's got Citizen Math, where it's about taking culturally relevant problems and situations and using math to approach them, which is sort of like what your global stories are doing, but they're from around the world. So I just see that connection, and that's what's bringing the joy back to math, because you're using mathematics to solve problems and connect to your environment and your culture and all that thing. So it's very connected to me.
Well, I love that, and that's what I love about Kareem's work. You'll do a mathematical task that literally helps a problem, or you illustrate the problem in the world. I think they're fantastically written and really really wonderful. I'd love for us to have a deeper connection, and a distinction with global math stories. So sort of an internal battle that we face here is how directed do we want to be with our stories. So, for instance, there's a community in the Philippines, and they're not Filipino because they really live off the coast of the Philippines, so they don't have to become Filipino citizens. The poorer among that community really live on a motorized boat. It's like, you know, 12 feet long by 6 feet wide, or maybe 16 by 6. It's a very interesting place to live. They go to an island to get water. They have conch fish, and then they sell it to the local market so they can pay for gas. And really, like 10 people in a family will live on that boat, which is phenomenal to think about how that would be like. So I did that presentation with a group of teachers, and then some teachers said, the way we want to use this is we're going to have our kids create a boat with their desks, and all the kids are going to spend the entire day working in that space to get a feel for what it's like.
Oh, wow.
I love that.
And a beautiful.
That's awesome.
And what I loved about it is I would never have thought about that. In the Jogglebox story, I had 2 teachers say, I'm going to have my kids write the story about the ant and termite that do not want to fight. They want to be friends. Sort of Romeo and Juliet circa Jogglebox. And I can never think about that. So what we've tried to do is keep global math stories open-ended enough so that teachers can make their own story about any of the stories. But then we also need to provide enough guidance to get them into it. And that's really what we're working on at this moment with global math stories. And it's a distinction between us and the Citizen Math Project, I think.
Greenhouse, are we ready to go to our traditional closing question? Or
we are. I did want to say before we go to our traditional close that all the links that have been mentioned to the site, to donating, all of that will be included in the show notes. So be sure, if you're interested in becoming part of this, donating whatever it is, to look at our show notes for this episode.
So, Chad, our close, and we'll let you go last because we've discovered that the guest always has the best stories and answers. So we'll let you go last. We like to share something that we say crush, but crush disappointed, challenged you recently in your professional world, and then something that inspired you or that is inspiring you in the work you're doing. I don't have a crush this week, Greenhouse, but I do have an inspire. What do you got?
I have a crush.
Okay, you crush and then I'll inspire.
So, as you know, you guys have been doing this for years yourself. So I'm working for a company where I do lots of different things, but I got put on a project where I am basically doing professional learning sessions with a group of teachers in a state. I'm not going to mention the state, but I had my first one, and basically it's pressure cooker. I am supposed to deliver professional learning in a 40-minute time slot virtually.
And it should be meaningful, systemic, and
Right. And so my first one, and they kept whatever. My first one happened, and it was a dismal failure, mainly because you get 40 minutes. It took them 10, 15 minutes to even get on because it's technical. So then I end up with 10 minutes to have to do a 40-minute presentation. And so I was like, how does anyone expect that this is going to make any impact on anybody? So I was just crushed. I was disappointed in myself. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a failure. So that was my crush this week. I'll let you go do the inspire.
So it's a Spire shout out in another link for the show notes. I want to shout out Berkeley Everett. He's very active on Twitter. If you've heard the name, he has a website. I've knew him. I've heard him at conferences. We've never met, but then he does. He and some friends have designed sweatshirts and T-shirts for math equity, like the one that says "I am a math person," and then you can choose like different mathematical designs on the back that are meant to stimulate conversation. And I'd seen those, and due to the ignorance of my school, they're going to make me department chair next year. I'm like, it'd be really cool if we had math department hoodies. Committed to equity. It's a big thing for me, trying to help. Our school doesn't always do a decent job of valuing and acknowledging our struggling learners. And so I'm like, we're going to get these sweatshirts. And I knew the designs. So he sells the t-shirts and sweatshirts. We can put the link up. And then they donate a chunk of the profits to Todos, which is an equity-based math education group in the States. So I emailed him and I said, I follow you on Twitter. I think you do some phenomenal work. I find you very inspiring. Hey, I live in Colombia and it costs way too much money and takes way too long to order clothing in the States to get shipped down here. Would you be willing to give me the files and I'll send you money to donate or whatever? What do you want? Well, at first he replied and he's like, yeah, that sounds great. Do you have Venmo or whatever? We don't have Venmo in Colombia. And then a few minutes later, he sends me an email. He's like, hey, I tell you what, pick a group that is focused on math equity where you are, and then I'll give you the files and you can do what you want. So I did. I made a donation to Mathkind.
Nice.
Oh, nice. Like that. Love that.
But anyway, so shout out to Berkeley. I mean, A, for the great work you're doing. It's some phenomenal stuff. And then B, for your kindness and willingness to help me out so we can spread the message of math equity here in my little corner of Bogota.
And I will be sure to include all those links in the show notes, including Todos, because that's a great organization.
True. Phenomenal group.
Great organization. Great partner of ours.
All right, Chad, your turn. Take us out with inspiration.
Good. Well, thank you for the time. Okay. Yeah. Well, so let me tell you the challenge for me has been doing some co-teaching. I did some professional development at a couple of schools near where I live. And I really wanted to work with the teachers and do some model and teaching. And it was so I learned a lot from it. It was also very humbling, especially with students who've been home for the past year with hoodies behind a mask, So, and here I come and go, all you do is just, ask the students to write a reflection at the end of class period. And I really learned so much. I mean, I was exhausted. I forget how exhausting generally it is for a teacher, but what teachers are doing now is remarkable. And I have a whole new respect for that. I challenge really anyone who's doing professional development to try to spend some time with the teachers side by side. I thought I had the best lesson planned. And in one class in particular, I couldn't get kids to focus for more than a minute. It was late in the day. They spent a year doing something. So I've gone home and sort of like you, Karen, I was like, what could I do differently? What did I do wrong? I'm awful at this thing. What am I doing telling people how they should teach? And I still feel that way, but I also have a whole bunch of ideas, like, can we get them moving? What is that going to look like? Let me build some tasks. And I'm lucky because I could spend a day building the task. And I want to share that with the teacher and go, hey, how can we make this work? So that was my challenge. And then the thing that I think is inspiring for me personally happened a little bit ago, but I think it's worth mentioning. So I do once a week. I work with some educators in Zimbabwe and also another group of educators in Malawi, and it was great for me because initially they thought I was going to show them some fancy algorithm that made all math easy. That obviously doesn't exist. We started with by math in your community, and they sort of bought into this idea of what teaching could look like. So they're starting to write their own mathematical tasks. And then Jenny Bay Williams is helping me with this, which is such a learning experience for me. But the teachers presented this task. One of the teachers said, okay, I have 5 students in my class. I have 4 bananas and 11 papayas. How can I divide them evenly? And it was exciting for me. I'm like, oh, the bananas is easy, right? We're all probably going, okay, we'll cut it in fifths and give each one 4. And papayas could be fun because do I give them a whole one? Do I cut some into fractions? And what fractions can I cut them into? It'd be easy to cut them all in the fifths, but there's something more interesting there. And one of the teachers in the community raised her hand and said, well, what if I ask my students if someone doesn't like bananas? And then I'll give them 3 papayas. And, that was like a drop the mic moment. Jenny and Bay and I were like, oh, yes, of course. And to me, that's why we want to empower locals to think about those creative solutions that we haven't thought about. And in our world, if the 7 billion people who have been told just to listen to the authority start having a voice for themselves, the problems in their communities that they can solve would be phenomenal. And so I always draw on that story as inspiration.
That is inspiring.
See, once again, the guest wins the day at the end. There we go. Chad, thank you so much for being willing to spend some time with us. I know we had some fits and starts getting this thing scheduled, but we all got healthy and available at the same time. So thank you so much for willing to share your story and your experience with us.
Yeah, it was nice to connect again. And I'm telling you, I'm gonna figure it out, and I'm gonna come join at some point. I've wanted to do that for years. So
that's exciting. I'd love to do it. And really, for everyone listening, I'm excited to have you all involved with what we're doing because truly we make a difference by creating a movement around teaching and learning. And it starts with mathematics. As geeky as that sounds as a mathematics educator, I think it starts with math.
I agree. And on that note, thank you. And for all of you who are listening, please be sure to check out our show notes and our website, 180days.education. Follow us on Twitter, all of the usual social media stuff. And we are excited that you're listening to us today. So thank you again.